Yo, welcome everybody to another episode of the Element Podcast. My name is Askia, and today we have a super special guest, Gabriel Whitehead. Gabriel and I have been assisting each other on our individual creative journeys for a couple years now, and I'm excited to have him on for this episode. It was a really good one. We really got into how his childhood impacts his life to this day. We also talk about his influence as being a black man in big tech and working for a big tech company and his experiences there. And then we also talk about how his creative journey has really impacted his life as a man and what it's like being a creative. We share some really good experiences, some tips, our individual perspectives on what it means to be a creative. So it's super exciting, really excited to get into this. It's a really good one, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. So go ahead, sit back, relax, and enjoy Gabriel and his element. Let's get it. These are always so nerve-wracking.
Yeah, before. For sure.
All right, cool beans. Yeah. All right, what's going on, everybody? My name is Askia. Welcome to the Element Podcast. I am here with a very special guest. Want to introduce yourself?
Gabriel. My name is Gabe. Super excited to be here, bro.
Totally, man.
It's tight to have this conversation. You know what I mean?
So. Yeah. I mean, we obviously grabbed coffee yesterday.
Yep.
And I've known you for a minute.
Yep.
I think the vibe, the frequency is there.
For sure.
It cites, I think, along the same kind of forward progression of humanity and like our circles.
Definitely.
And so I'm interested to get into it. I'm down. I'm hyped that you were like, yeah, let's go, especially on such short notice.
Yeah,
so,
no, for sure. I'm hyped that you even asked, you know what I mean? It's an honor that, that you're even interested in hearing my perspective and just keeping the conversation going.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate that.
Always, bro. So take the folks to the beginning. Where are you from? What do you do? A little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah. So let's see. I moved to Phoenix, Arizona in 2009. I was 15, moved out here from a small town called DeRidder, Louisiana. Town that's 10,000 people strong, right? So that was a super interesting experience. Came out here, went to a high school that had half the amount of people that was in the town that I grew up in. Yeah. So that was really, really shocking. My family's originally from the Bay Area, California. So and I was also homeschooled coming up, so I got to travel a lot and see different parts of the country, experience different things, which gave me a super unique experience, or I guess perspective as I moved through adolescence and started to come of age, right? So with that, early on I got into drawing and expressing myself through different creative mediums and stuff. Being homeschooled, you spend a lot of time alone. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So I had to learn how to live with myself, became a critical thinker, read a lot, watched a lot of things, got a hold of the internet, started learning about the world, researching things, trying to find really clothes and shoes that I couldn't get in the town that I was in.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of drove me down this creative path. Moved out here to Phoenix. When I graduated high school, went straight out to Arizona State and had a lot of fun. And that's where I got into doing clothes and expressing myself and really becoming a creative and starting to put stuff out there, building relationships, connecting with people, getting out there and just getting into a bunch of different things. Again, I went to Arizona State. Took me a little while to get through, It's not the easiest place to get through college when you have a lot of things that you want to get into and things you want to experience. But it was dope. I studied design, environmental design. Had an opportunity to go out to the Bay Area my second time around, going back to ASU. Went to ASU, left there, went to Scottsdale. Went to Scottsdale Film School and did that. Left film school, and then went back to Arizona State, and then boom, ended up in the Bay Area studying entrepreneurship, startup entrepreneurship, which opened my mind to so many different things, bro. And I was yo, this is crazy. I'm talking to billionaires and sitting with startup founders that have raised multi-millions of dollars, And, you know, I'm like hanging out with this 15-year-old like developer from Lebanon who's like one of the coolest people I've ever met. And we're still friends today. You know what I mean?
That's
and he's
crazy.
like smoking cigarettes and like shit like that because it's normal for him, you know? And so just like seeing these different things coming from, you know, super small town, and then, you know, just like experiencing those things
It
was
opens
sick.
up your perspective like
Dude,
crazy.
Wild,
Yeah.
you know? And then from there, you know, got a chance to get into like technology for real, got into like startups, like as a worker, I guess you would say. So got into like more of the business side. So some of the sales, like that kind of thing, like understanding product, all that type of stuff. Did startups for a while, went back to close, you know, like at the pandemic, like a lot of stuff shifted or whatever. Went back to like, you know, working in the industry for a few months, and now back into technology, man, and doing that. And so interesting story, and like getting back into like getting creative and working on some films, and, you know, working on some startups and just a bunch of stuff kind of going on right now, which is great. So
Totally, man. That's awesome. Where do you think like a source of this like energy that keeps you going from thing to thing or wanting to jump into different things? Because I've 100% experienced that. And I think for me, it comes a lot from like being unsettled, or, you know, we kind of talked about the other day is like, you know, not being able to consistently hold the same thing.
Yep.
And so there's pressure that builds up, and it's like, I'm interested in this. Let me now then go see this, and let me go see this. Where do you think a lot of, you know, you went from film school to the Bay, you know, jumping around ASU, you went around. Where do you think a lot of that energy, that spirit of wanting to experience and try different things comes from?
Yeah, man. That's a really great question.
Yeah.
So I may talk about my parents a lot because I think a lot of like my influence comes from them. So my parents are in their 60s now. I'm 27. So my parents are a little bit older. And by the time I was born, like my dad was in the military. So they traveled a lot, right? And so my pops being born and raised in Oakland in the 60s, and my mom growing up there in the 60s, they just by osmosis,
Wow,
you know what I mean? By osmosis, they were influenced by like everything that we're influenced by like today, you know what I mean? So, you know, the Bay Area was a hotbed for like impact and change and revolution, and like moving society forward. So there was always like movement going on, right? And so my pops, you know, by no means was he like an activist or like a Black Panther or anything like that. Yeah. He was really just a street kid from Oakland that was like, yo, I literally have to leave here or I'm going to be dead or in prison. So he joined the military in the 70s, like a lot of Black people do, you know, joined the military, and like they started traveling. So like by the time I was born, they had been to Europe twice, between like Fort Huachuca, Arizona, Washington, like the DC, like Virginia area, Germany, France, like all these different places. So they had so much perspective, and like really like brought that energy into like my childhood, you know what I mean? And into just like how we positioned ourselves in the world, like as a family. They were always like willing to like make a move where it made sense, whether it be like economically, whether it be like to create better opportunities for themselves. Even going as far back as like my grandmother, my mom's mom, single mother, bunch of girls, moved them out from like Inkster, Michigan, like in the middle of their middle school like careers across the country to the Bay Area. That's crazy. And that's how they ended up in Berkeley, because like unbeknownst to my grandmother, it was like, well, not a lot of opportunity in Inkster, Michigan. So like we probably need to go somewhere else. You know what I mean? So I think that's just kind of been the ethos of like my family, you know what I mean? And just what my parents have done, and like the shoulders that they left for me to stand on. I think like being a millennial, having access to information, like, you know, the world shrinking down into like an iPhone 13 mini, you know what I mean? Like made me just like, dude, you literally can do anything, you know what I mean? And like I feel like that's where a lot of that comes from, for sure.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's then a lot of pressure to keep it going? Because like for them, it's very obvious that like there is not a lot of opportunity here. So it's a very you have to go chase it. So now
Yeah.
that like there almost seems to be opportunity everywhere, is it kind of like, yo, I can't fumble the bag? Or
Yeah, dude, there's a sense of that
For sure.
especially like when I was younger.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, my mom, again, I was homeschooled. So like my mom ordered the 7th grade books when I was supposed to like go through 6th grade. So like
Right.
I skipped a grade.
Like, let's keep it going.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I felt like there was a lot of pressure for me to perform, because like when I would meet people and they, you know, and like their perspective of me would be like a different perspective than I had of myself. So like I didn't really feel pressure from like, I think I put pressure on myself, but like,
Of course.
yes, in a sense, especially when I was younger. So I think it was like obviously from like 17 to maybe like 25 that I really felt like, oh, like I absolutely have to be a millionaire before I'm like 30.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
Right.
that's where the jumping from like thing to thing kind of came. And then like the like fallacy of like social media or media just in general, you know what I mean? I think because of like my perspective and the way I like interacted with the world, you know, I formed like this perception that was like pretty spot on, but also like needed a little bit of like investigation and a little bit of like fine tuning and a little bit of like just wisdom and experience to come with it. Right. I felt like I was pretty intuitive around a lot of things, but had to like have some life experience to figure it out. So, you know, from like 17 to like 25, really felt the pressure. And then like I went and had this like experience for like, or 24, went and had this experience for like a couple years that like really flipped my perception. I got around like different type of people.
Yeah.
You know, people that were like nothing like me, you know, in a sense. People that were like really successful, like in their own right, and their like ideas of success, like were different. And so there was still like a sense of urgency. However, you know, the pressure just like recently kind of like has dissipated in a sense. And it's like, okay, what more, like, where did the pressure come from? First of all, examining that, and then like figuring out, and it's funny because I've been writing about this recently, but like, where did the pressure come from? And then like, what is actually important here?
Right.
What is the like why factor? Is it because you want a lot of money? Is it because you want to look cool? Is it because like you want to drive a cool car? Is it because you want to have like impact in people's lives, right? Is it because you want to like be a representation of something that like you didn't see, or maybe you needed to like help form your perspective a little bit more like thoroughly, or like so on and so forth. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
but like
so, for sure,
that's kind of like the outlook, if that makes sense, you know?
Definitely.
So
the you mentioned your pops and your parents growing up in Oakland, and having that revolutionary energy. How does that like transmute into your life, forward facing with your intersection of like tech and culture now? Like, do you see it rearing its head? Yeah,
dude. For sure. So like I'm in big technology, you know what I mean, at like a big company. And so, you know, there was a lot of like, just to be candid and transparent, a lot of code switching, you know what I mean?
Totally.
A lot of like, and it's like survival tactics.
You have to.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, you know, I guess you guys can see me on screen. Like if you see like my hands.
Oh, is that new
like
ink, bro?
Yeah.
Hey.
So I got tattooed
Let's
recently, but like people's perception usually doesn't match like, or a lot of times people's perception doesn't match like the reality of like who you are, right? So like coming from a creative background, you know, like getting tattooed, dressing a certain way, having long hair, like, you know, all these different things, like meant a lot to me. And it was like a part of like my expression. It was a part of like how I like, you know, obviously how I interacted with the world, how I wanted to present myself, all these different things. And there was this aspect of like, I grew up in the deep South where like, I think my next door neighbor was like in the KKK or something like crazy, you know?
That's nuts.
So like, you know, like literally like one of my best friends growing up, his name is Dusty. Shout out to Dusty. We used to hang, bro. Like, we used to hang. He was like one door over from us, and like me and my brother weren't allowed to like go inside their house.
Jeez.
You know what I mean? So these were like experiences that I was experiencing, like, that didn't really mean much when we were kids, but like looking back was like, oh, that's what that was. Oh, this is crazy. Like, wow, this is wild. Right? So to answer your question, like, I see that rearing up, being in technology a lot, because, you know, a lot of times in these situations, this is the first time people are having like a truly intimate like relationship, and intimate in the sense of like we're close, like we're on the same team, we have multiple goals, like we have goals that align with each other, like we're helping each other, and like our livelihoods are attached to our relationship. You know what I mean? With an individual that like they may see on a screen, you know, and like think one thing, but then it's like, but wait, like, you're sitting here with me making the same amount of money and like doing the same thing and excelling at it,
right?
And, you know, all these different things. So it's like I almost doubled down on, I was talking to my girl about this like the other day. I almost doubled down on some of the stuff to like really challenge like the implicit biases, and like, so it's not so much me being boisterous and like,
of course,
you know, all up in your face and whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop, but it's like, yeah, we do that sometimes too when we need to,
right?
But it's more like, how are you going to like, I'm not gonna sit here and teach you. You got to like kind of figure some of this stuff out yourself. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Because did you ever hear about the story, Daryl Davis?
Daryl Davis. No.
So he was like the black guy that had gone and like built relationships with like members of the KKK.
Oh,
and like went into their homes, went to their meetings and stuff.
Yeah, I have heard about that.
And then like I remember he was on Rogan's podcast, and he had brought in like some of the KKK robes that he was gifted to because he had converted people to like leave and stuff. And I think I'd have to assume that, you know, with like implicit biases that people see growing up on TV, you know, people who are other than them or other, right, in any capacity are a certain way because that's all they're exposed to. And so then once they're exposed to somebody, even if it's on like a Zoom meeting, right, it's like, oh, like you're not like how I think somebody would be, right? And then it's like, oh, you start building or breaking those like barriers down, you start breaking down those walls. So you find that very important, that then you're in those spaces, because then it's like,
absolutely,
bam,
absolutely, because I struggled, you know what I mean? You know, I'm a sensitive person, and so like I feel things, and like I'm a very perceptive person. Like growing up, you know, I was very, very perceptive and still am. And so, you know, I know what it's like to feel feel certain things and like experience certain things as a young person, and not really know like why I feel a certain way, and then how to like investigate it, and then how to work with it, you know, and figure out how to develop that confidence, right, and develop that self-love and self-appreciation, you know. Not that like I explicitly didn't love myself or like explicitly didn't appreciate myself, but I think a lot of us as you know, Black people, or people who are other, we go through these kind of like mental like hurdles of like, all right, like I'm feeling these type of ways, but like I also have to like perform at a certain level. I also have to be like 2 times as exceptional as my counterparts. Like I also have to like be able to like operate at my highest capacity, you know, in these spaces. And so, you know,
while still also taking crap sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? While still like figuring out how to like deal with these like microaggressions and these aggressions and things that like you're like, all right, whatever. You know what I mean? In situations. And so, yeah, I think it's really important, just like representing like in these spaces and doing it in a way that's authentic. You know what I mean? And doing it in a way where it's like, yo, like at work, yeah, like I'm wearing this. You know what I mean? Like I literally like my first couple weeks at this new place that I'm at, pull up on the Zoom meeting, you know, and it's like, there were times where it's like I pull up and I'm like button down, polo shirt, like trying to be professional, fresh cut, like the whole nine, trying to be professional, as if like my authentic, the way I present authentically and naturally isn't professional enough. You know what I mean? And that in and of itself, I think is, you know, somewhat of a protest, right? It's like a protest in and of itself, in a sense. So yeah, dude, I think it's like really important because also like my brother, I have an older brother. He has 3 little boys, you know, and one of them, his middle child, Callan, is like really, really similar to me. You know, I can tell like he's very perceptive, sensitive, like a sensitive person, and like, you know, just recognizing these aspects like of myself and like being able to like in retrospect see like another human being kind of going through like those things. Even he's 4, he can't like articulate it, but like I can see it in his eyes, you know what I mean? I can see it in how he like interacts with myself and people around him and all these different things.
And that helps you mentor him a little bit, help guide him a little bit.
Exactly.
As Uncle Gabe.
Yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? And like, you know, I say to my brother all the time, I'm like, dude, like imagine if one of our uncles like was able to like represent a certain like aspect of life, like these aspect of lives that we were like, that we're representing in their lives. Like imagine how more effective, how much more effective we could have, you know, we might have been earlier on like in life, you know what I mean? Totally. So it's like those kind of things that like I'm really thinking about when I'm in these spaces and like, you know, going from place to place and, you know, these different things. So.
Love it, man. What else do you have going on?
Man, so
because you're working full time at this spot,
working full time at the spot, and getting acclimated there, you know.
How long have you been there?
So I've been there since December, so it's pretty fresh,
recent.
pretty
new,
wow. You know. And that's a whole story in itself.
I'm sure.
You know what I mean? But
totally.
So but been there, you know, I guess a little over a month now, you know. A little over a month now, and outside of that, working on a startup. I can't like talk too much about it. We talked a little bit about it. I can't talk too much about it, but working with and I'm gonna do some shameless plugs here because I love, you know, working with the dope designer. Her name is Diane Holloway. Should definitely check her out if you get a chance to at some point. And shoe designer, she's a sneaker designer, Arizona State alum. And she came up with like a super duper sick technology, you know, that I think is pretty groundbreaking. You know, and so I'm working with her on her startup, helping like develop. I'm not a developer, but helping kind of like manage some of the product, working with the developers to bring it to market, you know, and bring like a product that is like worth using to market. So that's like one of the main extracurriculars that I'm working on right now. And then I actually am working on a short kind of film with some homies out of Oakland. They got a pretty dope brand. It's called Good Fishing. And myself and one of my mentors, you know him as well, Josh, Good. We've done some work with them in the past, like some editorial work and stuff like that. And so they hit me up to help them out with a film. And they are like essentially like what their brand is about. It's like a very spiritual kind of like vibe. But they're built on like fair trade, right? Organic cotton, organic materials, like all these different things. And every piece that they produce is like a completely original piece. So it's all like cut and sew. It's all like they source all their own materials. Like they do all of their dyeing like locally, like all like super dope, like super dope, like mission to be a part of. And the people behind the brand are like really amazing people. You know what I mean? And so been able to work with them a couple times. And they are kind of gearing up for this kind of new new world that they want to create, like elevating their brand from like these like really comfortable organic cotton like t-shirts with like, you know, graphic prints and, you know, essentials like socks and sweats and stuff like that, and like moving into like a higher, more elevated, maybe some more sophisticated pieces. So we're doing like this film that essentially like tells that story, but in this kind of like quirky, like avant-garde way that also tells a story of like who these founders are, right? And how their relationship comes together, and like what they're all about, and like, and that's representative through like imagery and like, you know, pace and the scoring and like sound design and like all these different aspects, just to kind of like reintroduce you to like who these people are, who the brand is, where they're going, like what they're trying to accomplish, these different things. So those are like the two main projects I'm working on myself. And yeah, I mean, I'm doing some like writing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just like some expressive stuff that like I may or may not put on the internet, but
right.
know, so, yeah.
So, you know, I mean, we were talking about keeping things close to your chest. You know, there's those things that like, you know, sometimes you got to keep here. You got to keep here that you hold near and dear. Through those like two different ventures or venues that you're leading into, what have you like learned about yourself? Like, what have been some things that like have come up that you're like, oh, let me assess that and let me work with that, and like, oh, I didn't know I was capable of doing that. Like, what are some of those things that that are there on that palette?
I've really learned. So I had a mentor once, introduced me to John C. Maxwell, who was like a big leadership dude, right? So I read a bunch of his books over the course of a couple years, and you know, he John Maxwell kind of defines like leadership as like influence and nothing else, right? So what I've learned through like a lot of these experiences is that you know, that I am capable of like leading, but not in the sense of like how people like think, what people think leading is, more so from like a servant aspect. So like servant leadership, right? Realizing that like, oh yeah, no, like none of this is even about me. Like, you know, like it doesn't even matter, you know. What's cool is I'm like developing experience and I'm learning along the way, and I'm learning that like these years of just like random research and being interested in things and just being curious and all these different things can really bring value to like other people, you know. And so what I'm learning about myself is that like I really enjoy like bringing value through things that I find interesting, you know what I mean? And like just working on really cool projects and really cool like opportunities to just like be expressive and like try new things, you know, meet new people, like build new relationships, you know what I mean? And I think that is really like the most important part, because, you know, coming up, especially in Phoenix, you know what I mean? Coming up in Phoenix, man, and like trying to like find your way. Like if you're not from Phoenix, you know what I mean? Like this isn't Los Angeles. This isn't New York. You know what I mean? This isn't Chicago. This isn't like, you know, these different places. It's Phoenix, and it's a really unique like place to like grow yourself and develop yourself and all these different aspects. And I think like the culture here and the community here is really amazing, and it's like growing and it's maturing, and like, you know, I'm realizing that there's like a huge opportunity to like be a part of that, you know, through building those relationships, kind of like we talked about yesterday, like through building those relationships, through like really just being excited to be a part of, because that then like supports everything else like that's going on, you know what I mean? And so that's something that like I've really like learned about myself and learned is really important, and learn to like focus more on that than like, oh, I got this like cool idea and this dope project or whatever that I want to get out. Like, how can I like connect with people to where we can like make something happen? It's more like, yo, what's going on where I can like
Right.
bring some value, you know what I mean, and bring something unique to the table.
And how do we
So,
create synergy?
yeah, exactly.
How do we create synergy?
For sure.
That's awesome, man. What would you how would you define creativity? And then how would you advise or suggest to people to try and harness it to better use it for good
Yeah.
or betterment of their lives?
Yeah. How I would define creativity, that's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like,
Yeah.
that's very macro.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
you know, what, like, how has creativity maybe then like showed itself in your life?
Yeah.
And then like, how can people like harness that?
Yeah. I think creativity is almost like synonymous with ingenuity
Okay.
and like resourcefulness, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Like being imaginative, you know, even like belief, you know, like having vision, like being able to like see further, but like to, I guess, dial it in. I think creativity is like exactly what it is, like being able to create something. And I'm not talking about like taking a piece of paper or getting a camera or like this, that, the other. Like being like a Solidity engineer, learning how to code on an L1 blockchain is like a really creative thing to do, right? It's like a mode of thinking, in my opinion, right? It's like a way of thinking of like critical thinking, right? You know, being able to start at the end and then like back into the beginning,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
In a sense where it's like, this is what I want. Like there's something that I want that is not there, you know, so I have to create it.
Right.
Cool. So there's like the first step.
Right.
And then like you go from what you're trying to create and then back into what has to happen to get you to what you're trying to create.
Right.
So like how it's shown up in my life has been taking like this creative kind of design thinking thought process and then evaluating the circumstances of like my life as an individual, and I'll like obviously speak for myself, right? You know, determining what type of like life and like what type of experience really I want to create for myself,
Right.
which is then like which was informed by like what type of experience I want to create for the people around me or the people that like come into my life or that I meet or whatever. Synergy, right?
Yeah.
And then like backing into it, you know, backing into like getting there, right? Determining what I value. Is it finances? Is it relationships? Is it, you know, family? Is it vanity, you know, for what it's worth? Is it, you know, all these different things? And then starting to create like action plans and starting to create like step-by-step like plans to like tackle some of these verticals, right? Okay, if it is family that like I value, what does that mean? What does that mean that I need to do with my time? Right? Which ultimately affects my finances, which ultimately affects like my resource to be able to give back to family or spend my time with family or, you know, so on and so forth. What is it that I want to like produce in the world, right? Do I want to just have a bunch of money and like that's it? Or do I want to like use those resources to like develop more resources or create something that impact somebody's life, you know, in a positive way or like whatever, so on and so forth. So I feel like just to like bring it back into the question, you know, creativity is like this thought process, this way of thinking. I call it like a 360, like a 360 view, like a 360 way of thinking around every like problem, or I'm not even gonna call it a problem, but like every like friction point like in life, right? Because you're trying to create less friction, you know what I mean? Or you're trying to create an outcome, or you're trying to create an experience. So I think that's what it is. It's really like a mode of thinking, and it's shown up like in literally like every aspect of my life. You know what I mean?
All over the place.
You know, literally like relationships, work, you know, obviously in like making art, you know what I mean? Networking, anything you can think of type of thing. Self-development, like personal growth, you know, anything you can think of, like creativity is there for sure.
Definitely. What are like some of the like habits that you tap into that kind of help sustain that?
Yep.
And keep that thinking going.
Yeah, man. So, you know, I was an athlete once upon a time, you know. I mean, what's Nike say? Everybody's an athlete, right?
Right.
So I guess I'm an athlete. So like at this point in my life, also getting older, you know, I'm also an introvert. So I use my time alone for sure. Sometimes it's just like to like doom scroll on the internet, and like sometimes it's
Did
like
you say doom scroll?
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. That's
you know
awesome.
what I mean? Just like trolling the internet,
feel
you know
that.
what I mean? Sometimes,
Scroll,
and sometimes it's like, you know, reading the Manifesto of Communism by like Karl Marx or something like that. Or like picking up a nonfiction book, you know, but like, so I say all that because time alone, right? So spending that time alone to just like cultivate myself and like be with myself. Solitude, you know, it's something that I've really like began to accept and like own, that like it's something that I really, really need to be the best version of myself. Then
where does that stem from?
I think like
then not over enjoyment, but just like the fascination with being alone.
Yeah. I think there was a moment in time. So, when I moved to Phoenix, you know, I didn't really know how to take it. Cause like I lived in Louisiana for 10 years. Like, so my friends from like the time I was 5 to 15.
Right.
So like my friends that I made there are still like my friends to this day, even if we don't like talk that much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like 20 plus year like relationships. And so it was hard for me, like, you know what I mean? Like it was a challenge. You know? And so like in adolescence and like my early 20s, like my late teens, obviously, and like early 20s, like I found myself like reaching, you know what I mean? For like a lot of things in a sense, not necessarily reaching, but like looking, you know, like looking for something, you know, that like I thought that I didn't have, like looking for something that I thought I needed.
Right.
Not realizing that like the thing that I needed was like myself, was like that time with myself to like sort out how I was feeling, you know what I mean? Like what I was going through, you know what I mean? Or at least like have enough of a pause to be like, oh, I am going through something.
Right.
So now I need to like get creative around like what resources I need to work through this stuff, you know what I mean? Or at least like figure out how to like leverage these things for something positive.
Right.
So that's one piece. And then like through that, I developed, you know, I'm just now like realizing this, but like I think we all do in a sense, like a lot of people do, but like learning like to set boundaries, you know, like for myself, and then like for people around me too, because I want to serve people. I love people. I love being around people, especially my people, but I also am introverted. So that's where I get my energy. But like through that, because it's almost like compensating for needing to be alone. You know what I mean?
I feel that, bro. I feel that.
The water,
100%. It's nuts, dude.
It's wild. So
because like so my sister got me that. So we're 75 hard. One of the tasks, right, is to drink a gallon of water a day.
Yep.
And that just changes the whole game.
It really does.
But like, you know, I keep a gallon on me typically all the time, just to be
sure.
able to like track that.
Yep.
And so yeah, obviously the byproduct of that is like pissing all of the time.
Yeah, for
all
sure.
All the time.
It feels
bro.
like you feel amazing. Though.
Yeah.
You
It's different, black and white.
Dude, it's a whole like, and it's crazy because like even your brain, like, well, your brain literally works differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's hydrated. It has like the gas almost to like operate at a higher capacity.
Source of life, bro.
Yeah, for sure.
The source of life. It's
kind of wild to think
nuts.
about.
No, it's crazy. It's crazy. People don't do it enough, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, you were talking about the power of introversion.
Yeah.
And like solitude.
For sure. So yeah, I think like a big part of it when I was talking about boundaries too was like I had like like I had this like people pleaser bone in me, and I'm like, what is this? Like,
why?
You know what I mean? Like, why? Like, why do I feel like I owe like something to like these people that are interested in maybe the work that I'm doing, or interested in who I am, or interested in my story, or like whatever it is. But like, why do I feel like I owe something? And it's not like a relationship. You know what I mean? It's not like this symbiotic relationship of like, I appreciate the energy you're giving me for being interested in the work that I might be doing, or like the creative things that I might be doing, or whatever. And then like I'm giving that back to you as like an infinity loop, instead of it being like, oh, people expect me to do this and be this and look like this and whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop and all that stuff, right? So it was like, learning to understand that, and like being vulnerable like with myself, and being like, dang, like I might need to work on that, bro. You know what I mean?
Needs
Type
to be
of
knocked.
thing, and then like learning to like build the boundaries like around that. And so that, like, those boundaries create the space, you know what I mean, for me to just like be in that solitude, like be alone, and like use that to like generate ideas, you know what I mean? Use that to like be creative, like use that to understand my perspective even better, you know what I mean? So that I can be more succinct and like more efficient with my communication, like all these different things. And then, the other piece to that is like exercise, like taking care of my body, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say I probably couldn't go through a 75 hard, I tried. I got like 4 days in. This was at the end of the year, and like all this different stuff, not making excuses, but
it's difficult.
But taking care of my body, and realizing that like you only have one. I had a season in my life where I'm a very neurotic person, you know what I mean? So like I would be in my head a lot, and so I would just use different things to like feel like I'm more in my body, whether it be substance,
right,
sex, shit that I shouldn't be doing, like whatever, you know what I mean, to create these different sensations of like being more present. And so after like working through a lot of that, and like really just like accepting that part of my life, and figuring out like what it was that drove me to like those type of behaviors, realizing that like being inside my body and like taking care of my body, and like getting to know my body, and like pushing my body, and like making it like perform effort, so that like I'm then having that conversation with my body, which is myself, but not just my brain.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's now I'm having the conversation with like my physical body and my brain, but my brain is having two conversations. It's talking to itself, but then it's also talking to my body and saying like, and having that discourse.
Yeah, it's like that mind body connection.
Correct.
Yeah, that's interesting, because then that fuels everything else, right? Like if those conversation pathways aren't interacting and like efficiently moving, then it just seems like you're gonna come up against some trouble. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by the idea of like creating your own struggle.
Yeah.
So that when struggle comes about, it's easier to handle and easier to deal with. Do you find that like moving your body, going through the physical stress, good stress that you're putting yourself through, like, does it help callous you in some capacity?
Absolutely. It does, right? Because I think of it like, because I just picked up running, so we're 15, I think we're like 15 days into the month. I think I've got like 20 miles down.
Nice.
You know what I mean? So like,
sheesh.
What it is exactly what you said, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's kind of like zooming out and then like zooming back in and realizing like, dude, like I'm 175 pounds. Like I'm literally like jumping off of the ground and into the ground, like over 1,000 times.
Gravity.
Like defying gravity. Like my bones are taking impact, all these different things, and realizing that like, wow, like my body is so strong, you know what I mean? That like I really could do anything, like I really could do anything. Cause I'm like, yo, this sucks. Like, this hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also like a reason why I have so many tattoos, but that's also another story. But like, yo, this sucks. You know what I mean? Like, this is painful. But I'm making a choice. So now I have some agency, right? So like, it kind of like doesn't allow you to slip into like victimizing yourself, even though you might be a victim, you know what I mean? In certain situations. Sure. Doesn't allow you to slip into like victimizing yourself. So it creates like a sense of like agency. And then it's like a test of like how far you can push yourself. Right. And then, like you said, the mind body connection, and realizing that like your body is so, realizing how much power your mind like has over your body. Right. So realizing that like, okay, my body might feel like shit, but if I put it in my mind that I can keep going, then I can keep going. So when you're at a startup or you're at a job or whatever, and a freaking global pandemic hits, right, and like you're a part of the organizational restructure, aka you get fired, right, and like you have no idea what to do next, right, you don't panic and like go into like some of your old habits and start to like treat yourself badly, or drink too much, or start smoking too much, or do this or do that. You start to like get creative. Yeah, you know what I mean? You start to like reach out to people and like tap into your relationships and like do these different things, you know what I mean? So I think it's really important. I can't say I'm perfect, you know what I mean, with it. I can't say that like I'm confident enough to build a brand around it or anything like that, but like, but I practice it, you know what I mean? And
that's the most important, bro.
Right.
That's the most important.
Exactly.
Is that like you're showing up every day, regardless of like how you feel. Yeah. Regardless of like how crappy the night was, no matter what's going on in life, it's like you're showing up, and then that's just like moving your body. And that's why I'm so fascinated with it, because there's like so many parallels there. Yep. It's like, okay, you're at work, you have a restructuring at your job, right? And you get fired. It's like, okay, now we can pick up and keep going, because like I've already gone through my own stress, and I'm going to keep showing up and keep doing it for myself. Yeah. Because I love myself. Absolutely. It really ties back. I love what you said. It ties back to self-love, bro. Yeah. Like I got a reminder on my iPhone, like every day at the same time, that tells me that, hey, you love yourself, bro. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, big. Just cause, dude, like, bro, it's 2022, man. We're in a global pandemic, and this is the United States of America. Yeah. And like, I'm no history buff, but you know about the United States of America. Right. Type of vibes. So yeah, it's real, man. It's the real deal for sure. What would you if you could go back to 15-year-old Gabe that just moved to Phoenix, what advice would you give him?
Oh, dude. Dang, bro.
Yeah, that's a bomb.
Oh, that's a bomb. Oh man. Really good question. And I want to give you a thoughtful answer.
Yeah, that's take your time, bro. Because it's important.
Yeah.
Like sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
Just like there.
Yeah.
Stressing like who are all these people?
Yep.
Black people around, like what? What's going on, bro?
Literally.
It's so out of place.
Just like so like fish out of water.
Yeah. What would you?
I think I would tell him, everything that you are is everything that you are.
Okay.
You know what I
Elaborate.
mean?
I think I know what you're saying, but
Like, in a sense, I would like, or everything that you are is true, if that makes sense. Your experience is true. Like your perspective is true. How you feel authentically is true. You know, how you perceive and how you're interacting, how you believe you should interact with the world, you know, is true. What you feel is authentic to who you are is true. And like you should be really, really proud and excited about that.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
totally.
Because being 15, 16, high school, you know, the whole nine, I think all of us are, you know, I mean, not even 15, 16, 25, 26, 30,
literally, bro,
40,
literally.
50. We're all still struggling with like just accepting ourselves, you know, and accepting like our authenticity and like really the vulnerability that comes with like being authentic, you know. And yeah, so I would tell him that all of that is exactly what you should be feeling and experiencing, and like you should like relish in that, because like eventually society's going to try to numb you to a point to where like you fit into a box and you fit into like what you think you should be and what you think you should, how you think you should like present, how you think you should how you think you should talk, how you think you should walk, you know, how you, all of these different things, you know what I mean? So I would just like explicitly like tell him that, you know what I mean?
Totally,
not
man.
You know, not in like this like roundabout way like your parents do, or like your grandparent, or like, you know, or like your elder or whatever, that like says like some you know, deep like forward quote or something like that you're supposed to investigate and dissect and like learn what it means. I would literally tell him that like explicitly. Nah, you're straight, bro. Like
that's huge.
solid.
Because oftentimes like and I'm again fascinated by like inner child work. So like the idea that we all have like this inner child that was like hurt by those that raised us, whether it's parents or guardians or whatever, that caused us to sort of, I mean, it's deep and fascinating. So there's this thought that like the idea in Christianity, like all who sin fall short of the glory of God, actually stems from like this idea that we all are born and raised in families that aren't perfect, everybody. And so growing up, like we experience things that aren't good from the people who should be exposing us to the most amount of good. Right.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is that creeps in like sin, or like this separation from what ought to be perfect. Right. And so what happens is that all of us are raised in these non-perfect families. And so we go through this like unfortunate traumas or situations that cause us to doubt, to cause us to disbelief in what ought to be perfect. And so we never go through the healing process of healing that child, right? And so you could be 40 years old and still insecure or scared, which translates into, you know, any type of different hells, right? So yeah, it's fascinating, bro, because it's like when we do that work, and when we talk to that kid, right? Like, yo, we get closer to God. You know, we get closer to like what ought to be perfect. And we go through it.
That's so real. It's so real. It's crazy you asked me that question too. Because that is something, it's crazy that you asked me that question in that context. Because that has been through like some of the creative endeavors that I'm pursuing, and like the extracurricular stuff, and like writing more, you know, leaning in more into relationships, being more vulnerable, being more open and stuff. That's literally like the conversation I thought I was having with like 27-year-old, like 2022 new year, new me, like big vibes, like Gabriel. But it's the conversation I'm having with like, you know, 15-year-old me, you know what I mean? Or 16-year-old me, you know what I mean? Coming out of high school and jumping off the porch per se into like this world of of anything that this world of like anything is possible. You know what I mean? This world of like, you know, this world that where the status quo was like obliterated, you know what I mean? Or has been obliterated. You know what I mean? Like how we grew up, we're from like the early to mid 90s, right? So we still have like remnants of like those generations before us that were like completely indoctrinated into, you know, into like the fallacy of like freedom, you know what I mean? Or the fallacy of like the society that we live in today. We are like a generation of pioneers where like, I feel like we were the first generation, like we catalyzed the breaking down of the barriers, right? So we are a generation where what like generations before us perceived to be true or perceived to be the status quo, perceived to be like the way, we charted our own paths. You know what I mean? And like we told ourselves that like, you know, as like traumatized and as like messed up, you know, as we are, that, you know, and how much we do struggle with like the self-love and like the self-appreciation and like all of that stuff. A part of our ethos is that like, no, like, dude, like our perspective and like who we are, our experiences, individually and collectively are important and like they matter and they're going to shape the future and you can't really stop it. You know what I mean? So like, you know, I think that is, I think that's just a huge part of just like where we're at, you know what I mean? And what like, I think I can't exactly remember the point of what that tangent was about.
All good.
Just candidly, but like, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah. That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. As we wrap up, like any last words, anything, like any drops of wisdom that you can kind of give people to help harness, you know, them fulfilling like their best self.
Yeah. I think, I mean, just from like my experience, like my lived experience and the things that I like went through, it's just like, just appreciating like your uniqueness, you know what I mean? Like appreciating like where and what you come from, you know? And like, focusing on like authenticity, you know what I mean? And like being okay with the fact that like your authentic self will not connect with or like be accepted by everyone. Right? And not just everyone in the broader sense, but anyone that you might want to accept it, you know what I mean? Or like that you believe should accept it, you know, or all these different things. And essentially what I'm saying is just like develop that agency inside yourself to like free yourself to like just move how you feel is appropriate for your life, how you feel is appropriate for like the people around you, and like how you feel is appropriate for like what you truly value, you know what I mean? And again, like understanding what you value and just funneling those resources, right? Funneling, and when I say resources, like your mind, your body, your spirit, your money, your time, you know, and like funneling those resources towards, you know, what is serving those values, you know what I mean? And what is authentic to those values. I think like if everyone could focus on that, we would have an amazing society.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Anxiety would be low.
Yeah.
You know, all these different things, right? And we'd be one big happy family. You know,
taking care of each other, man.
Taking care of each other, because then you can give freely,
Yeah.
you know, because you know that like the same amount of care, time, and attention you have put into taking care of yourself to be able to have resources to give, your counterpart is doing the same thing, right? So you don't have to keep a tab. You don't have to say, hey, you remember when whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop? It's like, oh yeah, no, like it's kind of like like what's understood doesn't have to be explained. You know what I mean?
Right,
kind of
totally.
thing. Hey, if you need something and I have the resource, you got it, you know? And like if I need something and you have the resource, I have it. There it is, you know,
Yeah,
simple.
no ifs, ands, or buts. Yeah.
Yep. So that would be that would be like my parting words. That's what I'm trying. That's like how I'm trying to represent myself. You know, that's how I am trying to like, you know, show up, you know, in relationships, you know what I mean? And if that means, you know, if that means I have to like take some steps back to move forward, you know, then that's what's got to happen. But
so be it.
You know, so.
Jeez, man. Well, it was a pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
thanks
thank
for
you,
pulling
bro.
up. It was good.
Definitely.
As expected. It was a great conversation, bro.
Hey, appreciate you, bro.
Always,
definitely.
man.
It was fun.
Cool. Until next time, bro.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was good.
Oh, yeah, how'd it feel?
Good, bro. Super therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just
It's crazy,
crazy.
isn't it?
Yeah.